Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and in the last one of these Introduction to GameMaker videos, I talked about things you can do with sprites, particularly pertaining to GameMaker instances, such as the player instance for this little knight character who we see running around the screen right now. And today I think I'd like to continue down the path of talking about graphics in GameMaker and talk about things such as tiles and tile sets that you might want to use to decorate a level in the room editor. So if I go into the asset pack that I just downloaded from the internet in the last video, and by the way, it came from, let me find it again. This is the page where I got it from. It is a free asset collection on itch.io. I will have it linked down in the description of the video if you want to go and download it and use it to follow along, or just download it for your own use, because it does look pretty comprehensive. As far as I can tell by eye, it looks like it was actually authored by a real artist and not just like crapped out by AI generation, which I know that some of us in the creative fields care about. So that's the assets that I'm going to be using for this video and probably the next couple as well. If I were to go into the folder where I downloaded and extracted them to, let me go into the environment folder as opposed to the like entities folder. Tile sets, and let me see which one of these I want to use right now. So let's go with floor tiles for now. Maybe later on I'll go and look at some of the other ones. If I were to just go and drag this into GameMaker to import it, it's going to tell me that importing files as a sprite is not an undoable action. By the way, if this message gets annoying, you can suppress it permanently by just checking this box. It can get a little bit annoying to see over and over again if you're working with a lot of sprites. I am not going to do anything like giving this a name like strip 15 or whatever, the same way that I did for the character sprites to make GameMaker automatically chop it up into frames. I'm just going to import this as it is. So firstly, let me give this an actual name. Let's call it something like SPR tiles floor, something to that effect. And unfortunately, I will not be able to actually use this to tile a room quite yet. So there's going to be some other things I'm going to have to do before we can get there. If I were to open up a room, and if I were to try and just like drag this into the room editor, it's not going to let me because I am on an instance type layer, and GameMaker's room editor will not let you mix asset types on layers. Perhaps it would be nice if it did, but that is one of the things that the room editor will just not let you do. If you attempt to do this, it will ask you to create a new asset layer, which you can just plop sprites down instead of object instances, and we can say create. And that is going to just plop down this entire sprite as a single entity. We can move it around, but we can't like paint with tiles that are on this tile set or anything like that, unfortunately. As a matter of interest, strictly speaking, inside GameMaker itself, like when the game is running through code, you can assign different asset types to a layer, but the room editor for organizational purposes just doesn't allow you to do that. Anyway, this is something that can be useful if you want to decorate your room with other types of sprites other than tiles, but it's not what we're here for today, so I'm just going to get rid of that. What I am going to do is I'm going to go right-click, create a new asset in the asset browser, and I'm going to select tileset down here, close to the bottom. And a tileset, let's give this a name. Let's call this ts underscore tiles floor, or should I just ts underscore tiles is kind of redundant. I'm just going to call that ts underscore floor. And a tile set is sort of, you can think of it as like a special type of sprite, or perhaps an extension to sprites, which allows you to use a sprite as tiles in the room editor. So when you create a tile set, you have to assign a sprite asset to it, and you can do that by clicking this and say select a sprite like that, or you can just like click and drag a sprite that you want to tile into this into the editor here. And when you do that, we're going to have a few grid lines drawn on top of the sprite. And doing this, we have now gone and chopped up our sprite into a collection of tiles. So over on the right over here, we have a couple properties pertaining to that grid. So there's the tile size, which is pretty obvious. You can also define like an offset horizontally or vertically, and spacing between each of the tiles if you have a tile set which has like some kind of offset or padding between tiles. But I'm just going to leave that as 0 for now. Down at the bottom, we have output border X and Y. I just want to draw attention to this because this is something that has to do with the way that the GameMaker compiler will treat the tile set. By default, these values are going to be 2. You can probably leave it like that. If you set them to 0, under certain conditions, you can see like visible seams between tiles, which probably isn't what you want. So just leave it as 2. And we've got the group, which is for analogous to the like texture settings in sprites. You also have the texture group there, and disable source sprite export. By default, this is going to be unchecked. If you want to use a tile set with collision, which is something I'm going to get to in a later video, you're going to need that to be unchecked because disabling source sprite export will just make that not work. If you're not intending to use collision on your tiles, you can check that box and it'll probably be fine because GameMaker will just discard sprite information that it doesn't need when your game is running. Let's see, what else do we have? I think that's it for tile properties themselves. There's some advanced features down here, so brush builder, tile animation, and auto tiling, and those are useful, but first I want to actually get something in the room. So let me go and create a tile layer. You can create new layers for different asset types or the same asset type in the room editor, by the way, by clicking on this plus icon over here. If you're looking at like older GameMaker tutorial media, you might see instead of this plus icon, you might just see these icons just lined up in a row down here in the room inspector, and they've added a few more types over the years, and basically there's just not enough space to display them all the time anymore, so they're hidden away inside this menu. But because I want tiles, let me go click a tile layer. We can give that a name if we'd like. You can call that tiles underscore floor, something to that effect. And we're going to need to set a tile asset to that tile layer. And again, you can do that by clicking on this, or you can click and drag an asset from the asset browser over here. There's like 3 or 4 different ways to do everything in GameMaker, isn't there? And now we can actually begin the incredibly fun process of like painting tiles in a GameMaker room. So let me see. What should I start with? Let's go with, like, sand. So you can, like, paint with a mouse, and you can place down tiles in the room. If you don't want to do that for something like a floor, which could get kind of old real fast, you can use some of the tools up here. For example, a rectangle, which will just paint a rectangle. There's also a paint bucket tool, which you can use to fill the entire room tile grid with a particular tile type. It's a flood fill tool. It works the same way as flood fill in like image editors and stuff. You can also go and there's not really a good tile here to show that off with, but if you want to flip or rotate tiles, there's a couple tools for that as well. Maybe I'll show that with some other tiles later on in the game. All right. If you want to erase tiles, you have 2 options. Again, there's like 5 ways of doing everything in GameMaker, for better or for worse. There's an eraser tool up in the toolbar up here, and you can just you can use that as an eraser. There's also in the upper left corner of every tile set. This is designated as basically the empty tile. Sometimes people find this counterintuitive. But in every tile set, automatically the upper left tile will be like the null tile, the empty tile. Even if in your sprite you happen to have something else there. This tile set doesn't, so that's okay. But if you, in your tile set, if you have something in that corner in the first tile up there, then you might want to move it to some other position in the image. Anyway, the eraser tool, you can basically delete a rectangle in the region doing something like that. You can select tiles and you can delete them, or you can like with Control X and Control V, you can like copy and paste them as brushes if you like. That seems a little bit silly. I don't know why I did that. So right off the bat, you might be noticing that the player character kind of disappeared underneath the tiles, and that is because the order in which these are arranged in the layers in the room do matter. So right now my tiles underscore floor are above my instances layer, and that means that the tiles by default are going to be sorted above the player. Which is often not what you want. If you have something like a foreground layer of tiles, you might want to make that go on top, but if you have something like the floor, most likely you want that to be drawn below the player. And these are stacked top to bottom. Anyway, I can also, I guess I can run the game and we'll see that we just have, we have tiles like this in GameMaker. And my character sprite is scaled up here. The tile layer is not scaled up. In fact, I don't think tile layers actually have a like a scale property.
Hey.
So this is definitely like, it looks a little bit weird to have the player so much bigger than the tiles, and this is definitely the sort of place where you might want to use a solution for making the player big other than just setting the image x scale like this. Image x scale, image y scale to some big number. Anyway, subject for another video. If I want to layer these, if I were to go and just like draw some other, let me zoom in like this. If I were to go and draw some other tiles like this, we can see that they're overwriting our sand tiles, our ground tiles, which isn't really what you want when you have like a border like that. So instead, I'm going to go create myself a second tile layer like this. We can call this tiles grass, something to that effect perhaps. Let me go and set my tile set to our ground tiles like this. And now, because this is a separate layer from the stuff underneath it, we can go and maybe create something like this. And we're going to have a square of just grass patched on top of the sand like that. And now we've got a basically a substrate of sand or dirt or whatever you want to call that, and a surface layer of grass. And you can create as many of these as you want. You can layer as many of them on top of each other as you want. And if I were to run the game now, it would come out exactly as you expect it to, just with a huge player, because we did make the player huge. All right. Do I want to do anything else with any of the other tiles for, like, decoration? So, a lot of these, I don't want this video to be, like, level design. That's not really what we're about here. Let's see. What does this one look like? Alright, those are dungeon tiles. I wasn't sure if that was, like, outside props or anything like that. We have water tiles. This actually looks like it's for, tile animation, which is, something you can do in GameMaker, but perhaps a story for some other day. Let me look at props. Let's go into what's on here. So these are also tile layers. We've got some rocks. All right. We've got some like tools and trees and bushes and that sort of thing. Okay, I was actually hoping these would be separate sprites, but okay, these are separate sprites. You know what I'm gonna do is let me go and just drag this into GameMaker. Again, I'm not gonna prefix it with like strip whatever because I want this to I just want this as a single file. We can import that sprite, spr tree, and give it a name. If I go into the image editor and say convert to frames, let's see, my number of frames is going to be, I think 6. Frames per row is going to be 3. Frame width is going to be 64 because these are a little bit wider, and frame height is going to be, I'm going to say 160. Nope, not quite that big, 128. Somewhere in the middle, 144. All right. That'll do it. So we can go and separate those sprites into frames, and I think now I might look at the room editor and look at just dragging instances of SPR underscore tree in here. So let me go and create an asset layer, and we can see that we can just drag a sprite around like this. This is definitely much more a much more useful use for asset layers than like dragging the floor tile sprite onto it, because that's silly. And for individual sprites that you might add to the room on an asset layer, you can edit their properties in the little inspector down in the bottom left of the room editor over here. So you can set the position, you can set the scale of a sprite if you'd like. Let's go and set our sprite scale to 1.5. That's gonna look weird with the pixel density, but play with me. You can also just do that by, if I can grab it, like stretching the drag handles on the sprite in the room editor. You can also rotate. Come on, you can also rotate your sprite like that. That definitely looks a little weird. You can horizontally flip or mirror your sprite, which will invert the X or Y image scale. You can set your animation speed if you want your images to be animated, and these will animate by default, won't they? Which is going to look a little bit bizarre. Yeah, that's not normal. Let's set that animation speed to 0. And if you have like a sprite like this, which has a couple different images within, like this, you can also set your image frame. This is not exactly the this wouldn't be my preferred way of setting a sprite image frame for something like this. I kind of wish that there was like a visual like strip of image frames and you could just like click on the one that you want, but maybe later if I remember I'll submit that as a feature request to the room editor or something. This is going to have this tree sitting still and this tree is going to be flashing like that, which is yeah, let's not do that. Can set you to a different sprite frame now. All right. You can, by the way, also set a lot of these properties on instances. I didn't really point this out in earlier videos when I just slapped down the player character in the room and called it a day, but a lot of the same properties for sprite assets that you might set, you can also set for instances. The difference, by the way, so by convention, things that you need to be able to interact with in a game should be instances. Things that need to have collision, things that need to have behaviors, things like that should be instances. Whereas entities that are just purely there for visual purposes, you can usually get away with having just having a sprite on an asset layer. Sprite assets are, on the whole, slightly easier to work with just when you're designing your levels because they have fewer moving parts. And also, GameMaker can draw them slightly more efficiently than instances. So if you have a lot of just like... And I don't want to make it sound like GameMaker is always going to do everything slowly, because God knows that's something that the internet hasn't argued about enough. But if you have like a thousand just sprites that are just purely there for visual purposes, like trees or bushes or grass or something like that, or that kind of thing, you might want to consider just having those be sprite assets like this that GameMaker is just going to draw on its own without having all the other stuff that comes with an instance. Whereas if you have something that the player needs to interact with, like if you can cut down the tree, or if you can like harvest something from a bush, or something like that, you probably should go and make those just instances. Anyway, anything else I'd like to do in here right now? I think I've covered all the things that I really wanted to hit. Advanced uses of tiles, by the way, so things like all the other stuff that I basically ignored in the tileset editor. I want to have a separate video for all of this because I don't want to like shortchange any of it, especially some of the more interesting features. I might make a video on that next. Haven't decided yet. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna set this scale back to 1 because it's annoying me, and I think I'm also gonna go and set the player character scale to 1 because it being so much bigger than everything else is also annoying me. So let me go and change that. Let me go and set those values. And I think I'm going to end this off here. So my name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. This almost looks like an actual game now. It's crazy how far we've come in like 4 videos. I do like to make videos on stuff you can do in GameMaker, so if you're interested in seeing more of this series on getting started with the engine, or if you're interested in weird advanced stuff like 3D or shaders or whatever, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spy-Dye Games, Pixelated Pope, Mantaray, GameMaker, GameMart Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Brenton, and Boketa for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.